Appreciate Caleb covering for me last week. Let's see here. Get the right place. Everybody get a handout? Already lost it? Lauren's probably got it. She's protecting it. Well, we finished up chapter 7 last time. And now we're going to be, surprise, surprise, chapter 8. So we're looking at chapter 7. Of course, we see what happened. Everything finally came out about what was going on. And we see that Haman is hung on the gallows that he made for Mordecai. And so now the people are rejoicing, knowing, or I'm sure Esther and Mordecai are, knowing that Haman, the plot is now over in that sense. But Mordecai is gone, but what does that mean that the decree is gone? No, why is that? Yeah, it already went out. And it cannot be changed. We know that. So we're talking a little more about that as we go along. And so their demise or their end, the Jews' end, is still coming if something is not done. And so that's chapter 8. And so somebody want to read, let's see. Let's read verse 1 through 8, please. So I'm not sure about the family. I looked into that and I could not find where it talked about his family. But to me, it kind of seemed like it would. They would be under, maybe they would become slaves or servants of the queen.
That would be interesting, his wife.
Yeah, would be his wife and all that were in his house. But I definitely, and if you look at, Barnes stated this, it's confiscation of goods accompanied public execution in Persia, as in other Oriental countries. So it was common that if a man was executed like that, that his goods would then just be transferred to someone. And in this sense, it was given to Queen Esther. So we know it's more than likely his servants, the people that was in his house. Could be his family. We don't know. What else? Everything he owned, including what was he going to pay to the king for killing the Jews? Lots of money. So she has inherited, and it's not inherited, but she has acquired a great sum of things. Now, the king, of course, is going to be the richest person in the kingdom. But what was Haman? Second in command. So she has been given now really everything that he owned, which could be in a great, great sum. We're not told, but we know that it's big enough that she appoints Mordecai to be over it. And so, it's just interesting. Yeah, I definitely think it was a large sum of money for sure. So that's now included into her stuff that she has. So now she has this house that she is over. She has all his money, his possessions, whatever the case may be. And so, Mordecai, then it says, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So she had not, of course, stated who she was, how she was related to Mordecai or anything until this point. And, of course, the king knows Mordecai, right? Mordecai has been honored. Mordecai had saved his life. This was, he thinks a lot of Mordecai. It's easy to I guess it's easy to trust someone that protected you and saved your life. And so he wanted to honor him. Of course, we talked about that before. So then it says that, verse 2, the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. So as we talked about, he is now over all of the things that Esther just acquired. To be the servants, things like that. I think it'd be similar to Joseph, right? Joseph in Potiphar's house, in control of all his things. Now she has gifted that to him, or that position. But even more significant, what does the king give Mordecai? The signet ring, right? Yeah, the signet ring, it represents authority, power. But what position did Haman hold? Second in command. Now Mordecai has been really promoted to that position, given that signet ring of his position, showing that authority that now he has.
So does this guy have a lot of signet rings? Because he gave it to Haman in chapter 2, and now he's giving it to Mordecai.
He took the one that he gave Haman and gave it to Mordecai. So he took it back from Haman.
I thought you didn't think he just had a closet.
He just had a closet full. He had a big group, big case of them. No, this is the one, it says here, that which he had taken from Haman. So he had given it to Haman, and now he gave it to Mordecai. So it represents him be put in a position of that great power. He's now second in command of the country, the kingdom. Think about this. Haman, so Mordecai is in the same position as Haman. How did Haman act in that position? Okay, he was crazy. Yeah. He demanded people to respect him. He demanded people to honor him. He demanded people to fear him. He wanted people to see him and his glory and all that stuff. And where did it lead him? Yeah, it led him to be hung. Now Mordecai didn't ask for the honor, didn't ask for the wealth, he didn't ask for the power, and here he is in that position. So let me read. Go ahead.
Mordecai, he's going to be far more respected.
Mm-hmm.
If people are just going to do things, he won't have to demand that people do things. They'll just do it because of who he is, because of his character. And Haman, jealous of situation and people like that. I think that's probably because Mordecai was an appreciated guy,
Mm-hmm.
especially by the servants and stuff. And Haman probably, I would think, you hate to read too much into it, probably saw that.
Yeah, and you see at the end of chapter was it chapter 7, where when Haman, everything was figured out, the eunuchs is like, hey, there's that gallows. I think that the eunuchs they didn't like him. The servants didn't like him either. But could have Haman been that way like Mordecai? For sure. Could have changed. It was his attitude. It was his personality. Not his personality. It was his personality, but he made his personality to be that way. He made his characteristics to be that way. And so he was not respected. Yet Mordecai is going to be. And we're going to see that. I'm sure we will. We're going to see that, especially the Jews. They really respected him. And I'm sure the people did too. But somebody read Proverbs 27, 2 and 3.
Let another man praise you and not your own mouth, and a stranger and not your own lips. A stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than both of them.
All right, so you think about it. I think we've talked about this verse a little bit before, but do not be going out and trying to get people to honor you, or as Haman did, brag about himself. Let others praise you. Let others honor you. That's what Mordecai is doing here. He didn't go out looking for this position and wanting that glory and honor. He was given it because of his personality, his characteristics. And as we're going to see, he does go out wearing the robes and showing people, but I think that was because of the position he was in. He needed to. The king later on has him do that. And so, we're seeing a difference in this position, which, we see that with Daniel. We saw that with Joseph and how they were in this type of position. Mordecai is very similar. And so he's now second in command. He is given the control over all the possessions and everything that Esther owns. And so that brings us to verse 3. And so now Esther spoke again to the king. So she falls down at his feet. She implores him with tears to counteract. What does the word counteract mean? To turn around. So she goes before the king, tearful. She knows what's still going to happen if she doesn't do something. And she's asking him to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite. So that means she is asking him to retract what he had put out as that proclamation. It says, in the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And so the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. That's an interesting verse. Does that sound similar to what we saw before? She goes before the king. The king reaches out his scepter to her. Now, there's different thoughts on this. Is this similar? Was she at risk of losing her life again by going in front of the king here? Or is it just him, saying, I'm going to grant your petition, whatever you're desiring? I don't know.
I think it's just him wanting to know what her wishes were.
Yeah.
What she wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably the case.
Been through, and they've been through, I would think he would be like, I want to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, because she obviously knew some plot that he didn't, and I'm sure he was pretty upset. He was upset with Haman for sure. And so we're seeing this same thing again. He's reaching out his scepter to her. And so verse 4, she continues, and the king held out his scepter, verse 5, and said, if it pleases the king, and I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. And so here, this desire for her to have him reverse this law. So I'm going to read Daniel 6 and verse 13 through 15. There's something interesting stated here, but also we see about this law. Daniel 6, 13 through 15.
So they answered and said before the king that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. He labored till the day, going
Okay. So in this account of Daniel, they made the decree that you're not supposed to go and pray. What does Daniel do? He goes and prays. So now they have informed the king of what had happened. And so you can see the heartbreak in the king here, in his voice and the things that he said and what's going on here. Because why? Yeah, he didn't want to put his friend to death. You think about it. For one, the law couldn't be changed. So according to the law that he had signed, Daniel had to be killed. Daniel had to die. And you can see the king being upset here. And to the point that the king, it says, how long did he try to figure out something different? Yeah, a day. So what do you think he was trying to do during that time? What does that mean that he was trying, I guess, in a sense, till the end of the day to figure something out? He's trying to find a way around the law. He's trying to find a way to reverse it. He's trying to find a way to keep this from happening because he knows his friend's going to die. But it could not be changed, and that's what stayed in verse 15. And so, you can see the struggle a king has. Even though he signed the law, he put his ring upon it. It was done in his name. He couldn't change it, even if he didn't like it. And of course, we know the outcome of this with Daniel. That is very similar to what's happening here, because now, here he has his queen, who is a Jew, who could lose her life. His now second in command, Mordecai, who is a Jew, could lose his life. The king can't do nothing about it. And
It also states something like, of course, that's italic, I don't know what that means. Does that mean it's a put-in word?
it's added for context,
My
yeah.
Bible says, and the thing seems right to the king. So it seems like to me she wants to make sure he's in favor of it before he does anything.
Exactly. I think that's 100% right. There's a quote down here by Roper, who is a commentator, that says similar to what you just stated. Esther's formal request was prefaced by 4 ifs. 4 reasons she hoped the king would grant her petition. Number 1, if it pleases the king, imply that she would not have him do anything against his will. In saying, if I had found favor before him, she was asking him to remember his love for her. If the matter seems proper to the king, suggests that she wanted him to do only what was right in his own eyes. And then adding, if I'm pleasing in his sight, she was inviting him to look at her and see how loving and lovely she was. And so the thought there is that she does not want him to do something, like you said, against against the law. She wants him to do what is right. She's not.
That way it felt in his heart.
Yeah. Because he could. I mean, he could, in a sense. He's the king. Say, you know what? We're changing the law. But by doing that, he's going against the law. And so that's a problem for him. What would have happened from that? I don't know. I don't know if there would have been a court that took him out of position, or people that said, now you have to die because of that, and he's killed for that. I don't know. But we can see in her request, it's interesting that she's so wordy in a sense. In her petition here, she's very careful to say, I want you to do what you think is right. I want you to be pleased with what you decide to do here. And she's, in a sense, imploring for him to remember, I'm your wife, in a sense. So then verse 6, it says, for how can I endure to see that evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? She doesn't want to see him die.
She didn't say a word about herself, though.
No. She's talking about her people, which would include herself.
I know, but I think she was more concerned about them than herself.
It says a lot about her character, for sure. So then verse 7, it says, then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So his answer was, you brainstorm, paraphrasing here, you brainstorm, You find out what you can do. Write a decree, and I will trust that you're doing the right thing. Now, didn't he do this before? Yeah, he did. With Haman. Haman says, hey, there's these people. He's lying to him. He's deceiving him. He says, do what you think's best, and I'll sign it. He's doing the same thing here. But I think he has more trust in Mordecai and Esther here, for sure, than he did, knowing how they are. And so he's trusting them. He's trusting them, and his answer is, he can't reverse the words or break the law, so he left it up to them, in a sense, to devise a plan to save their people. He's giving them great power. He said, whatever you write, I'm going to sign it. It's going to be in my name. And then notice at the end of that, it says, for whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. Who else had a signet ring? Mordecai. So could Mordecai write a law and sign it, and it could never be changed? I don't think so. And this is why I don't think there is. Because the king, of course, is above him. And it's stated here, whatever is done in the king's name cannot be changed. So if Mordecai had done that, the king could have changed it. I don't know. It's kind of implication there. But the king is saying, there's no one above me. So if I sign it and I seal it, it cannot be changed.
Would you assume maybe the signet rings are just a tad different, maybe?
Probably.
To know, like, who did sign and who didn't?
Yeah.
Cereal box they got them out of.
Yeah.
What's cereal box? Yeah. Do they have Kellogg's? What do they have? You don't get prizes in the cereal box anymore. I would definitely think they would be different. So, determining who that person is and their position. And so he trusts them. He puts great trust in them. He gives them great power to do what needs to be done. And so that brings us to verse 9. So we want to read verse 9 through, verse 14.
So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. By these letters the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and alienate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. How far is that supposed to go?
Through 14.
A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan, the citadel.
All right, so verse 9, after they have been given the authority to do this, the king's scribes were called. And so these scribes were the ones that would write these decrees. And then it was done in the 3rd month. Now, the 3rd month would have been 2.5 months past the time the first decree was made. So we've went 2.5 months. And so, you think about the people in that 2.5 months, what they have endured, knowing that there was going to be a day that they were going to lose their life. And so you can see the urgency in the king and also Queen Esther and Mordecai to make sure that this new decree gets out quickly. And so the scribes are called together, verse 9, and it says that it was written according to what Mordecai commanded. So now Mordecai is he's calling the shots here. He knows what needs to be done, and he now orders these scribes to write these things down. And it's to be sent out to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia. Now, we talked about how big his control was. It was from India. India, we know where India is at, all the way to Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia would be in this area here. And so I looked it up. There's only 2 times the word India is used in the Bible, and it's in Esther. But it's interesting because it was Medo-Persia who then took India and put it into its power. It was the first nation to do that. And after that, Alexander the Great does that. He sweeps his power across for 15 years, ends up in India 15 years later, and there his men lose hope, and they want to go home. And so, but it's interesting, India is brought up here, but India to Ethiopia. And so, how many people and languages do you think is throughout India to Ethiopia? Yeah, you've got Egyptians, you got Greeks, you've got Jews, Hebrew, all the way to India, which is, we know is Hindu today. But the language and things that's there, a lot of different languages.
Every state in India has a different language today.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, and then most of Africa has a different language.
Exactly.
As you go state to state.
So you can imagine how many people it took to write all of this in all these different languages. And so it was to be done into all these different languages, to all these different people. And that's the end of verse 9. And then verse 10, he wrote, in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet, and sent it by couriers on horseback. Now, we talked about that. They had a system of basically like the Pony Express that we had in here in America. They had pioneered that fast speed of getting things from one point to another in the kingdom through horses. And here we see these horses that were bred just for that. And that was a part of the royal king's, the king's, I don't know what you call a group of horses. Herd? I guess a herd. And so these letters went out. So the idea of being swift here and getting these letters out. And so verse 11, these letters the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives. Now, we're going to see, if you read this, as we had, it's very similar to the decree that came out first. To kill, to destroy, to annihilate any forces of people or province that would assault them, both children, little children, and women, and plunder their possessions. That is almost exactly like the proclamation that went out before. What is the only difference? That's that first part, to protect their lives. Was this an assault upon anybody that wasn't a Jew, or was this a defense of their lives? The defense. The first proclamation was almost identical, except it was to go on the offensive and attack. This one is to go on the defense. So if they did not attack you, you don't do anything to them. But they were allowed to also kill little children and women that tried to assault them, and then take their possessions. So that was the same thing that the other people were allowed to do, was to kill the Jews and take everything they had. They could do the same thing if someone assaulted them. So if you had a family of people who came in and tried to kill a family of Jews, they could defend themselves and then take their stuff. But did they do that? They probably did some. Somebody read Esther 9, verse 15 and 16.
For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 70 and 5,000, that they laid not their hands on the prey.
So you would think that people would say, you know what, we're not going to do this. But as we see, over 75,000 people still tried. But did the Jews take their plunder? No. Not in these two examples. And so it's interesting, they were allowed to, but they didn't. Why, we're not told, but it's interesting to look at. And so this was to happen on the same day, on the month of Adar, that the proclamation went out. And so in verse 13, a copy of the document was issued in every province, published to the people. Verse 14, the couriers rode on royal horses, went out, hastened, and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in the Shushan, the citadel. And so this proclamation went out quickly, just like the first one did. So then verse 15, so Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel, blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And so now Mordecai goes out and presents himself to the people as that second in command. Now, was he trying to be not jealous, but arrogant and prideful by doing this? No.
I think he was rejoicing with them.
He was rejoicing with them. He was showing them that, hey, you now have a defender in the king's ear for you as the people of the Jews. But not only that, he's now second in command. People need to know that. And the only way that's going to happen is by him putting on his royal garb and going out like he should. So in verse 16, it says, the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. The word light there means a joyous well-being. So they had the joyous feeling of that they're not going to die. They can now protect themselves. They can now live. And so they have joy, they have honor. Verse 17, in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews fell upon them. That's interesting. Many people proselyted into Judaism because of fear. They were scared that they may die. Maybe they were on the fence. Maybe they said, you know what, it's better to join them than lose our life. As we're going to see, though, 75,000 plus people still tried. And so it says they had a holiday. That means just a good day. They were celebrating. That holiday that we talked about earlier doesn't start until later. But that's chapter 8. Any questions on anything in that chapter? All right. Thank you guys for your time.